Commander Jin Ho stood on the bridge of what appeared to be humanity's last battleship. The metal walls around him shook violently as enemy fire pounded against the shields. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, and the sound of alarms filled the air. To anyone watching, this looked like the final moments of human resistance against the mighty Vorthak Empire. But Jin Ho wasn't scared. In fact, he was trying very hard not to smile. Through the large windows of his ship's bridge, he could see the massive Vorthak fleet spreading across space like a dark cloud. Their ships were enormous, some as big as entire cities floating in the void. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could destroy planets, and their hulls gleamed with advanced technology that made human ships look like toys by comparison. Admiral Krexel, the leader of the Vorthak forces, was probably celebrating right now. Jin Ho could imagine the alien commander on his flagship, watching what he believed was the destruction of Earth's final defense force. The Vorthak had been conquering worlds for thousands of years, and they thought humans were just another weak species to be crushed under their boots. "Sir, another wave of their fighters is approaching," reported He Jin, his tactical officer. She was a young woman with sharp eyes who had been with Jin Ho for 5 years. Like everyone else on the bridge, she was playing her part perfectly. Her voice sounded worried and desperate, but Jin Ho could see the tiny smile she was hiding. "All ships prepare for emergency jump," Jin Ho shouted into his communication device, making sure his voice cracked with fear. "We can't hold them much longer." Around them in space, other human ships were exploding in brilliant flashes of light. The explosions looked real, massive fireballs that lit up the darkness, pieces of metal spinning away into the void. The Vorthak. Weapons were tearing through the human fleet like paper. It was exactly what the aliens expected to see. What they didn't know was that every single explosion was fake. The ships being destroyed weren't real vessels at all. They were incredibly advanced holograms, three-dimensional images made of light that looked and moved just like actual spaceships. The technology behind these projections was so sophisticated that even the Vorthak's advanced sensors couldn't tell the difference. Every blast, every piece of flying debris, every desperate radio call, it was all part of an elaborate show. Jin Ho's real ship was protected by a special cloaking device that made it invisible to enemy sensors. While the Vorthak thought they were destroying his flagship, they were actually shooting at empty space. The same was true for every other human vessel in the battle. "Please, we surrender," Jin Ho broadcast on all frequencies, letting genuine-sounding panic fill his voice. "Don't destroy us, we give up." On his tactical display, he could see the Vorthak fleet moving closer, their commanders eager to finish off what they thought were the last humans in the galaxy. Their communications were buzzing with excitement. The aliens were already planning victory celebrations and deciding how to divide up Earth's resources among themselves. He Jin monitored their enemy chatter through advanced listening devices. "Sir, they're calling us pathetic meat creatures," she whispered, barely holding back laughter. "Admiral Krexel just ordered his finest wine to be brought up from storage." "Good," Jin Ho replied quietly. "The more confident they become, the better this will work." For months, human intelligence had been studying Vorthak psychology. These aliens were proud warriors who valued strength above everything else. They looked down on any species they considered weak, and they especially enjoyed crushing enemies who begged for mercy. The more desperate and helpless humans appeared, the more the Vorthak would lower their guard. This fake battle was the final act in a deception that had taken years to plan. The human ships the Vorthak had been fighting for the past 6 months weren't humanity's real military at all. They were deliberately weakened vessels, designed to look primitive and outmatched. Every defeat, every retreat, every desperate plea for peace, it had all been carefully planned to make the aliens overconfident. The real human fleet was waiting in dark space, far beyond the edge of the galaxy, where no one would think to look. These weren't the clunky, barely functional ships the Vorthak had been fighting. The actual human military possessed technology so advanced it would make the aliens' weapons look like ancient swords compared to laser cannons. "Sir, the last fake ship is ready for destruction," He Jin reported. Jin Ho nodded. "Do it. Make it look good." On the main screen, the final human vessel exploded in a spectacular display of fire and light. The holographic ship came apart in realistic chunks, with fake crew members' final transmissions filling the radio waves with cries of despair. Admiral Krexel's voice boomed across the communication channels, speaking in the harsh, guttural language of his people. Jinho's translator turned the alien words into English. "The human plague has been eliminated. Victory belongs to the Vorthak Empire." The enemy fleet began to spread out, preparing to head toward Earth for the final conquest. In their minds, the war was over. Humanity was finished. All that remained was to claim their new territory and enslave any humans who had survived on the home planet. If only they knew what was really coming for them. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, Dr. Min Seo sat in a room that didn't officially exist. The underground command center was carved directly into Luna's rock, hidden so well that even the most advanced scanners would find nothing but empty stone. Around her, dozens of holographic screens floated in the air, each one showing different pieces of information about humanity's enemies. Min Seo had been studying the Vorthak Empire for 37 years. She knew everything about them, how they thought, what they feared, what made them angry, and most importantly, what made them stupid. Right now, she was watching their communications with the satisfaction of someone whose life's work was finally paying off. "Look at this," she said to herself, pointing at one of the floating displays. The screen showed intercepted messages between Vorthak commanders, and they were exactly what she had predicted. The aliens were already arguing about which of their officers would get the best positions in the new territories they planned to steal from humanity. On another screen, she could see Admiral Krexel giving orders to prepare victory celebrations on 12 different worlds across the galaxy. The alien commander was so confident that he had already written his speech for the triumph ceremony. He was planning to parade captured human prisoners through the streets of his capital city, while crowds of Vorthak citizens cheered. "They really never learn," Min Seo muttered, shaking her head. She had spent decades learning how the Vorthak mind worked. These aliens weren't just warriors, they were bullies on a galactic scale. They conquered weaker species, not just for resources or territory, but because it made them feel superior. The more helpless their enemies appeared, the more the Vorthak enjoyed crushing them. This psychological need was their greatest weakness, and Min Seo had built humanity's entire war strategy around exploiting it. Her fingers moved across a complex control panel, opening a secure communication channel that used quantum encryption. The technology was so advanced that even if the Vorthak intercepted the signal, it would take them several thousand years to decode it. "Admiral Tae-ho," she said as a holographic image of a middle-aged Korean man appeared in front of her. Even though he was thousands of light years away, the quantum link made it seem like he was standing right there in the room. "Dr. Min Seo," Admiral Tae-ho replied with a slight bow of respect. "I assume our guests have taken the bait?" "Better than we hoped," Min Seo answered, unable to hide her excitement. "They're not just confident, they're practically drunk on their own success. Krexel has already sent word to the Vorthak High Council that humanity has been completely eliminated. They're treating this like it's over." Admiral Tai-ho smiled grimly. "And our real forces?" "Ready and waiting," Min Seo confirmed. "The entire fleet is positioned in the Void Zone, just as we planned. Every ship is fully armed and operational. They have no idea what's about to hit them." The Void Zone was a region of space so dark and empty that most species avoided it entirely. It existed in the gap between galaxies, where there were no stars, no planets, and no reason for anyone to go exploring. It was the perfect hiding place for humanity's true military might. What the Vorthak had been fighting for the past months wasn't even close to humanity's real army. Those ships had been deliberately designed to look primitive and weak. Their weapons were older models, their shields were intentionally flawed, and their tactics were made to seem desperate and unorganized. The real human fleet was something entirely different. These ships used technology that was centuries ahead of anything the Vorthak possessed. They could move faster than light without using the standard jump drives that other species relied on. Their weapons could tear holes in space itself, and their defensive systems could bend time and gravity to protect them from enemy fire. The beautiful thing about studying an enemy for so long, Minseo continued, is that you learn to predict exactly how they'll react to everything. The Vorthak are like children in some ways. They see what they want to see, and they never question whether things might be more complicated than they appear. She gestured to another floating screen that showed detailed psychological profiles of key Vorthak leaders. Each profile contained decades of research, their personal histories, their fears, their ambitions, and most importantly, their blind spots. Admiral Krexel, for example, Minseo explained, pointing to the alien's image. He's conquered 43 different worlds, and every single victory has followed the same pattern. He uses overwhelming force to crush his enemies quickly, then enjoys a long celebration before moving on to the next target. He's never faced an enemy that could match his strength, so he doesn't even know how to recognize one. Admiral Taeho nodded approvingly. And the other commanders? Same story, different details. They're all bullies who have never learned to fight someone their own size. The concept of being outmatched is so foreign to them that they literally cannot imagine it happening. Minseo's hands moved across her control panel again, bringing up tactical displays of the hidden human fleet. Ship after ship appeared on the screens, massive vessels that dwarfed even the largest Vorthak dreadnoughts. There were thousands of them, all waiting silently in the darkness between galaxies. The Vorthak think they're apex predators, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. They believe they're the most dangerous hunters in the galaxy. They've spent so long terrorizing weaker species that they've forgotten something very important. Which is? Admiral Taeho asked, though he already knew the answer. Minseo smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. There's always a bigger predator, and sometimes that predator is smart enough to let you think you're winning right up until the moment it decides to show you how wrong you were. Her fingers danced across the final control sequence, activating systems that had been dormant for years. Across the galaxy, hidden sensors began waking up. Advanced computers started running final calculations, and the most powerful military force in human history prepared to reveal itself. Time to show them what happens, Minseo said quietly, when apex predators mistake themselves for the only hunters in the forest. Admiral Taeho stood perfectly still on the bridge of the UHSS Dragon's Wake, watching the stars through windows that shouldn't have been able to exist. The ship around him was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. While most vessels traveled through normal space, the Dragon's Wake existed in multiple dimensions at once. Parts of it were here in regular reality, while other sections phased in and out of parallel universes. It was technology so advanced that even looking at the ship from the outside could make your brain hurt. The bridge itself was a marvel of human engineering. Instead of the cramped, button-filled control rooms that most species used, this space was open and flowing. Holographic displays floated everywhere like glowing butterflies, each one showing different aspects of the ship's incredible systems. The floor was made of a material that felt solid under your feet, but was actually a form of controlled energy, capable of reshaping itself at a moment's notice. Around the Dragon's Wake, the rest of humanity's true fleet was slowly coming to life, after years of silent waiting. These weren't the primitive ships the Vorthak had been fighting. These vessels were works of art and science combined, each one representing centuries of secret human development. Some ships looked like they were made of liquid starlight, constantly shifting and flowing as they moved through space. Others appeared to be constructed from crystallized time itself, their surfaces showing glimpses of past and future simultaneously. "Admiral," came a voice that seemed to speak directly into Taeho's mind. "All systems are responding beautifully. We're ready to show these bullies what real power looks like." The voice belonged to Nova, the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created by human scientists. She wasn't just a computer program. She was a digital consciousness that had been growing and learning for decades. Nova existed simultaneously across every ship in the fleet, able to coordinate millions of complex operations at the speed of thought. "How long have you been inside their systems, Nova?" Taeho asked, speaking aloud even though he could have communicated with her telepathically through his neural implant. 7 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Nova replied with what sounded like satisfaction. "I've been living in their computers like a ghost, watching everything they do, learning all their secrets. They still use primitive firewalls that I could break through in my sleep. It's almost embarrassing how easy it was. While the Vorthak thought they had advanced technology, their computer systems were actually hundreds of years behind what humans had developed. Nova had been able to slip into their networks without anyone noticing, like a master thief walking through a house where all the doors had been left wide open. "What have you learned about their current status?" Taeho inquired, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Oh, Admiral, they're having such a wonderful party," Nova said, and there was definitely amusement in her electronic voice. "Admiral, Krexel is drinking something called victory wine and bragging to his officers about how easily he crushed the human resistance. He's already planning his next conquest. Apparently he wants to attack the Zilonian Republic next week." Through Nova's connection to the Vorthak systems, Taeho could see exactly what their enemies were doing. The alien fleet was spreading out in a celebration formation, their ships moving slowly and carelessly through space. Their weapons were powered down, their shields were at minimum strength, and most of their crew members were probably getting drunk on whatever aliens used for alcohol. "They have no idea we exist," Nova continued. "In their minds, they just fought humanity's entire military and won. The concept that we might have better ships hidden away somewhere has never even occurred to them. They're like children who think they've beaten the biggest kid in school, not realizing that kid's older brother is about to show up." Taeho walked over to the main command station, his footsteps making no sound on the energy floor. Around him, his crew of 50 officers worked at stations that looked more like musical instruments than military equipment. These weren't ordinary humans. They were enhanced with technology that allowed them to think faster, react quicker, and interface directly with the ship's systems. "Captain Sung-min," Taeho called to his tactical officer, "what's the status of our weapon systems?" Captain Sung-min looked up from his station, where streams of data flowed through the air like rivers of light. "All reality manipulators are online, sir. The quantum torpedoes are loaded and ready. The spacefold cannons are charged to full capacity. Honestly, sir, this feels like bringing a laser sword to a rock fight." That was an understatement. The weapons on human ships didn't just blow things up. They could rewrite the basic laws of physics in localized areas. A reality manipulator could make an enemy ship suddenly find itself existing in a universe where its armor was made of paper instead of metal. Quantum torpedoes didn't explode. They convinced the target that it had never existed in the first place. Spacefold cannons could fire shots that arrived at their destination before they were actually fired. "Nova, show me their fleet composition," Taeho ordered. The air in front of him shimmered, and suddenly he was looking at a perfect three-dimensional map of the Vorthak forces. There were over 3,000 enemy ships spread across several light-years of space. Each ship was detailed down to individual crew members, thanks to Nova's infiltration of their systems. "Impressive numbers," Taeho admitted. "Under normal circumstances, this would be a formidable force." "Under normal circumstances, Admiral," Nova replied. "They would be. But these aren't normal circumstances. They're about to face a human fleet that exists partially outside of reality itself. It's like comparing a group of cave dwellers with clubs to a modern army with advanced weapons." Taeho nodded and moved to the center of the bridge. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship in the fleet. There were only about 500 vessels compared to the Vorthak's 3,000, but the difference and capability was so vast it almost wasn't fair. "All ships," Taeho announced, his voice being transmitted instantly across the entire fleet through quantum communication. "This is Admiral Taeho. For years we've watched these bullies terrorize innocent species across the galaxy. Today that ends. Today they learn what happens when predators mistake themselves for the apex." He paused, feeling the weight of the moment. Across the fleet, thousands of enhanced humans were preparing for a battle that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "Nova, tear open the veil. All ships begin the emergence." Around the Dragon's wake, space itself began to change. The fabric of reality rippled like water as the human fleet started to phase from the hidden dimensions back into normal space. What had been empty void suddenly filled with ships that seemed to be made of condensed starlight and crystallized dreams. The real war was about to begin. The Vorthak celebration ended in the most terrifying way possible, with complete and absolute silence. Admiral Krexel had been raising his fourth glass of victory wine when his ship's warning system suddenly exploded with alarms. The bridge lights shifted from the warm yellow of celebration mode to the harsh red of combat alert. Officers who had been laughing and congratulating each other moments before now scrambled to their stations with confusion and growing fear. "What's happening?" Krexel demanded, his victory wine forgotten as it spilled across the floor. "Are there more human ships? I thought we destroyed them all." His tactical officer, a nervous alien named Vexitar, was frantically working at his control station. The readings he was seeing made no sense. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures appearing all around us, but that's impossible. These readings are off the scale. Nothing should be able to generate this much power." Through the massive windows of his flagship, Krexel could see space itself beginning to change. What had been empty void was now rippling, like water, with strange lights dancing between the stars. Then slowly at first, but with gathering speed, shapes began to appear in the darkness. The first human ship that emerged from whatever dimension it had been hiding in was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It looked like someone had taken a piece of a star and shaped it into a vessel. Its hull gleamed with an inner light that seemed to pulse with life, and as it moved, reality itself seemed to bend around it. "By the void," whispered Vextar, his voice filled with awe and terror. "What kind of technology is this?" More ships appeared, each one more impossible than the last. Some looked like they were made of crystallized time, their surfaces showing glimpses of the past and future simultaneously. Others seemed to be constructed from pure energy, constantly shifting and flowing as they moved through space. There were vessels that appeared to exist in multiple dimensions at once, flickering in and out of visibility as they phased between realities. Within minutes, the human fleet had completely surrounded the Vorthak forces. But these weren't the primitive, barely functional ships that Krexel's forces had been fighting for months. These vessels radiated power that made the mightiest Vorthak dreadnought look like a child's toy. "Attention, Vorthak fleet," came a calm, feminine voice broadcast across all their communication channels. The voice belonged to Captain Su-Jin, commander of the human vessel Stellar Harmony. Her ship was a work of art, a flowing, organic-looking craft that seemed to breathe as it moved through space. "I am Captain Su-Jin of the United Human Space Navy," the voice continued, speaking in perfect Vorthak, despite the fact that humans supposedly knew nothing about their language. "You have been celebrating your victory over what you believed was our military. I'm afraid you were mistaken." Krexel tried to respond, but found that his communication systems weren't working. In fact, none of his ship's systems seemed to be responding properly. His weapons wouldn't charge, his shields flickered weakly, and his engines produced only a faint hum instead of their usual powerful roar. "You're probably wondering why your technology isn't working correctly," Captain Su-Jin's voice continued, and there was definitely amusement in her tone. "That's because we've been inside your computer systems for years. We know every circuit, every program, every weakness in your ships. We've been studying you like specimens in a laboratory while you thought we were primitive savages." To demonstrate her point, Captain Su-Jin's ship approached a squadron of 12 Vorthak destroyers. These were powerful warships, each one capable of destroying a planet if necessary. The Stellar Harmony was smaller than any single one of them, but as it moved closer, something impossible happened. The Vorthak ships simply stopped working. One by one, their shields failed with a soft shimmer, like soap bubbles popping in the sunlight. Their weapons powered down automatically. Their engines went silent. Within 30 seconds, 12 of the Empire's most advanced warships had been reduced to helpless metal shells floating in space. "Do you see how easily your shields fail?" Captain Su-Jin's voice was now broadcasting to every ship in the Vorthak fleet. "We've been studying your technology for decades, while you assumed we were still discovering fire. Your advanced systems are like open books to us. We can turn them off as easily as flipping a light switch. But the human ships didn't stop with just disabling their enemies. They began to demonstrate capabilities that defied everything the Vorthak thought they knew about physics and warfare. One human vessel fired what looked like a beam of pure starlight at a Vorthak battleship. Instead of exploding, the alien ship began to change. Its hull transformed from metal to what appeared to be flower petals, beautiful but completely useless for space travel. The crew inside was unharmed, but their mighty warship had become a floating garden. Another human ship shot something that looked like crystallized time at a group of enemy fighters. The Vorthak pilots found themselves moving in slow motion, their ships crawling through space at a snail's pace, while everything else moved at normal speed. They were trapped in a bubble of slowed time, helpless but alive. "This is impossible," Krexel finally managed to shout into his communication system. "No species has technology like this. It violates the fundamental laws of physics." "Admiral Krexel," Captain Sujin replied, and somehow she knew exactly who he was and where he was located. "You've spent so long conquering primitive worlds that you forgot something important. The universe is much larger and stranger than your little empire ever imagined. There are always bigger fish in the ocean." Around the battlefield, human ships were systematically dismantling the Vorthak fleet with surgical precision. But they weren't destroying the alien vessels. They were disabling them, transforming them or trapping them in various ways that left the crews alive but completely helpless. A massive Vorthak dreadnought tried to flee, its captain desperately ordering maximum power to the engines. But a sleek human ship simply appeared in front of it, not flew there but literally materialized out of thin air. The human vessel fired a single shot that turned the dreadnought's hull into a mirror-like surface. Now the alien ship was so reflective that its own crew couldn't see out of it, and its sensors couldn't detect anything beyond its own reflection. "Why aren't you killing us?" Krexel asked, his voice now small and frightened instead of commanding and proud. Captain Sujin's reply sent chills through every Vorthak who heard it. "Because we want you to go home and tell everyone what you saw. Here today, we want every species in the galaxy to know that humanity isn't the weak prey you thought we were. We're the predators who were patient enough to let you think you were winning until it was time to teach you better." In less than 20 minutes, the entire Vorthak fleet had been neutralized. Not a single alien had been killed, but their mighty armada was now nothing more than a collection of disabled, transformed or trapped vessels floating helplessly in space. The lesson was complete, and it would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. The grand throne room of the former Vorthak Empire looked completely different now. Where once there had been dark metal walls decorated with the skulls of conquered enemies, there were now living gardens with flowers from a dozen different worlds. The massive black throne that Admiral Krexel used to sit on had been replaced, with a simple round table where everyone could sit as equals. Ambassador Unji sat calmly at this table, reviewing holographic reports that floated in the air around her. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, but there was something about her presence that commanded respect. Across from her sat the members of what was now called the Reformed Vorthak Council, former military commanders who had traded their weapons for farming tools and research equipment. "The harvest reports from Sector 7 look excellent," Yunji said, her voice warm but businesslike. "Your people have really taken to agricultural work. The food production numbers are 30% higher than we projected." Krexel, the former admiral who had once commanded fleets that terrorized entire star systems, now wore simple farming clothes instead of his military uniform. His hands, which used to give orders for planetary bombardments, were now stained with soil from the gardens he tended every day. "Thank you, Ambassador," he replied quietly. There was no anger in his voice anymore, just a kind of tired acceptance. "My people have learned to find satisfaction in growing things instead of destroying them. It's different from what we're used to, but not unpleasant." It had been exactly 1 year since the battle that changed everything. In that time, the mighty Vorthak Empire had been completely transformed. Their war fleets had been dismantled and turned into farming equipment and research stations. Their weapons factories now produced tools for building instead of instruments for destruction. Their soldiers had become teachers, doctors, and agricultural specialists. "The rehabilitation programs are working better than we hoped," Yunji continued, scrolling through more reports. "Your crime rates have dropped to almost zero. Your people are healthier than they've been in generations, and your children are learning to read and write instead of just learning how to fight." It wasn't that humans had been cruel to their former enemies. In fact, The transformation had been surprisingly gentle. Instead of throwing the Vorthak into prison camps or enslaving them, humanity had simply redirected their society. The aliens who had once spent their time planning conquests now spent their days studying science, growing food, and building beautiful things. We've also received the final reports from your archaeological teams, Yunji added, pulling up another holographic display. The historical research you're doing on the worlds you used to conquer is providing incredible insights into those civilizations. It's ironic you're learning more about the people you destroyed than you ever knew when you were fighting them. This was perhaps the most interesting part of the Vorthak transformation. As part of their rehabilitation, they were required to study and document the cultures they had wiped out during their centuries of conquest. Former warriors now spent their time carefully excavating ruins, translating ancient languages, and preserving the memory of civilizations that no longer existed. Nova, how are the integration programs progressing? Yunji asked, turning to address the shimmering holographic figure that stood beside the table. Nova's form flickered with what looked like satisfaction. The AI had evolved even further over the past year, and her holographic appearance now looked almost completely human, except for the way she seemed to be made of flowing light instead of solid matter. "Remarkably well, Ambassador," Nova replied, her voice carrying that same mix of friendliness and subtle threat that had become her trademark. "Crime rates among the Vorthak population are down 97%. Educational achievement is up 400%. And most importantly, there have been 0 attempts at rebellion or resistance in the past 6 months." She paused, and her holographic form smiled in a way that was both warm and slightly unsettling. "Consider this educational custody, really. The Vorthak are learning what it means to be productive members of galactic society instead of its biggest bullies. Behave for a few centuries, and we might even let you govern yourselves again." Through the large windows of the former throne room, you could see one of the most remarkable sights in the galaxy. In what had once been a military parade ground where Vorthak soldiers practiced for war, there was now a beautiful park filled with playing children. Human children and young Vorthak ran around together, laughing and playing games that would have been impossible just a year ago. They chased each other through gardens that bloomed with flowers from both species' home worlds. They built sandcastles in playgrounds that had been constructed on the exact spots where weapons used to be stored. "The children adapt the fastest," Yunji observed, watching the scene outside with genuine warmth. "Young Vorthak who grow up in this new system won't even remember the old ways. To them, cooperation and peace will be normal, while war and conquest will seem like ancient history." One of the former Vorthak commanders, a female named Zixara, who now ran an interstellar agricultural research program, spoke up hesitantly. "Ambassador, may I ask a question?" "Of course," Yunji replied. "Why did you humans show us mercy? Our people conquered and destroyed countless worlds. We would have done the same to Earth if we had been able to. Yet instead of punishing us, you've helped us become better. Why?" Yunji was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "Because true strength isn't about how much damage you can do," she finally said. "It's about knowing when not to do that damage. Any species can destroy. It takes wisdom to build something better." Nova's hologram nodded in agreement. "Besides," the AI added with that flickering smile, "reformed bullies often make the best protectors. You understand what it's like to be on both sides now. That makes you valuable allies instead of just defeated enemies." The transformation wasn't complete yet, and everyone in the room knew it would take generations before the Vorthak fully adapted to their new way of life. But the progress was undeniable. A species that had spent thousands of years as galactic predators was learning to be gardeners, teachers, and scholars instead. "The galaxy is watching," Yunji said, standing up from the table. "Other aggressive species are seeing what happened to the mighty Vorthak Empire. Some are reconsidering their own plans for conquest. Others are reaching out to establish peaceful diplomatic relations with humanity for the first time." She walked over to the window and looked out at the children playing in the gardens. "This is the new order," she said quietly. "Not conquest and domination, but cooperation and growth, not taking from others but building something better together. Outside, a young human girl was teaching a group of Vorthak children how to plant flowers, while a young Vorthak boy showed human kids how to build sculptures from crystallized sand. They were all laughing together, completely unaware that their friendship represented one of the most important developments in galactic history. The apex predators had shown their mercy, but the galaxy would never forget their strength.